it's starting. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, Sabrina. How are you?
Well, Sue, tell me a little bit about what those boxes outside the window are.
Those poor little boxes outside my window are beehives, and it's Wisconsin, so let's give you a visual of this. There's a lot of white snow out there. It's been so cold that we've been in the house for about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Pretty much. Mm-hmm. The beehives out there are wrapped really well in black tar paper and a little insulation because it's cold here in Wisconsin and they need to be snuggled up. And
how cold is cold, Sue?
How cold is cold? Well,
I mean, the refrigerator's cold.
Yeah,
is it that
well,
cold?
It's been -4 for the last 12 days.
Get out!
-4 for the last 4 days.
Jeez.
Now, we have wind chill.
What is wind chill?
Well, it makes everything really freaking cold.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
and so those poor bees, now do you think they're going to live through the winter?
I sure hope they're going to live through the winter. As long as we keep getting little warm-up spells, like every 9-10 days,
sure,
so that they can feed, they should be fine. But those are little beehives out there, and they're out there because...
Can't keep them in the house. I mean, how many beehives have you ever heard of in a house?
Oh, wait, I have to tell you. I know several beekeepers that have kept their bees in their house, and I'm not one of those beekeepers.
Interesting.
No.
So what part of the house do they keep their bees?
Sometimes they keep them in their basements because basements typically will stay like 50 degrees if they're dug in deep enough here in Wisconsin. But there are some beekeepers that I've met and I know that have bees that actually live within the walls of their home, and I'm not talking an observation hive. An observation hive is something where you like purposefully build a hive inside the wall with plexiglass so you can watch them. They can go out and fly, but you can watch them. It's like having BBTV. But the people I'm talking about actually live with their bees within the walls of their house.
And do they take the honey from the walls?
No, not that I know of, no.
They just have bees in their wall.
They just,
Hey, I would have no problem with that. I mean, I'd be fine with bees. I mean, they're not that interested in me, right? Because honeybees...
I just want a house that's insulated a little bit better than beeswax and honeycomb. I'm sorry. I prefer it a little bit more cozy inside. And then if you get it cozy inside, of course, those bees are going to fly all over inside. And
sure. So they probably keep their house pretty cold.
I'm guessing that house is probably pretty cold anyway, yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So how many beehives do you have outside?
Outside right now...
Of this perimeter.
Of this perimeter, from like which we can view from 2 windows here, there are 110 hives.
110 hives.
Well, what you don't see, Sabrina, is right now what Sabrina's looking out in my yard and she's seeing individual hives.
Yeah, I see about 10, maybe.
Yeah. But if she'd look a little farther left or right, she'd see that I have some trailers, and those trailers are wrapped 4x4 pallets of bees, and some of them a couple hives high. So
wow.
Yeah.
So you know bees.
I know a little bit about bees.
She's a little bit of a bee expert.
I know a little bit about bees.
I will admit something to you. I knew that. I don't know. Call me crazy, but I had this crazy idea of maybe I would like to start a beehive.
That was, yeah,
a good idea. Well, it was something that I'd wanted to do for a while, and this past year, which would have been year 2014, was my year to do things that if I had anything come up that I thought, you know, I've always wanted to do that. I stopped right then and I took the initiative to actually start it. And at one point, that came up. I'd seen a seminar where I could go and learn about how to start a beehive, and I thought, I've always wanted to do that, so I caught myself and I said, this is happening. Unfortunately, I was sick. I don't get sick often, but I was sick and I couldn't go to the meeting, but my sister attended it for me, and Sue presented the getting started.
She says she was sick. I think she probably just lost her way getting to my house.
No, you have no idea how sick I was.
But anyway, it was last year in probably
around February. And so I started a beehive. Now, my sister went to the seminar and learned everything and took notes, but then I actually did it all. So it was kind of a little backwards, but Anyways, that's where I was lucky enough to have Sue as my mentor. So when I had green pollen in my beehive,
Yes,
and
Sabrina
I thought they were molded, I thought my bees had molded honey and wax. Little did I know that.
It was so funny because she calls and she's like, "Oh my God, Sue, I don't know what's going wrong. I think I have mold growing inside my hive." And I'm like, "Oh, tell me about your hive." And she's like, "Well, I don't know. It's got like pink spots and yellow spots and orange spots and blue spots." And I'm like, "Sabrina, I think they're just bringing in different pollen sources and that's all, the funky colors." I'm not sure.
No, actually, she called them psychedelic bees.
She
I
has
was bringing
psychedelic
some
bees.
Psychedelic
And you know, really,
pollen.
it's kind of cool because I get a chance to go and look at a lot of people's beehives, and everybody does it a little different. And then the sources that the bees are getting pollen and nectar from, all have different like wildflower sources. So Sabrina lives in an area where there's quite a few fields.
Yes.
I also noticed that there's a guy growing grapes.
Yes.
Not too far from her.
A vineyard. Yes.
Yeah, a small vineyard up there. And there's also across the way a family who has horses. And so honeybees really like to go and eat the leftover grains from the horses. So like they'll eat that corn schmitz and whatever, which is part of that bright yellow. She had some like really bright yellows.
Like mustard yellow.
Yeah, and so it just had to do with what was growing in her immediate area, but she's pretty psychedelic and her bees pick up on that.
My bees and I, we go way back.
But
like a few months.
but the thing that's funny about her hive is, if you know Sabrina,
and you guys are just getting to know me, but just wait.
She is so super structured in some ways, it's crazy. And then there are other parts of her that are so like crazy and psychedelic.
And that's where Sue comes in.
Yeah, because I'm a psychic. I'm a bee psychic. I help out those bees, try to figure out what the meaning of life is. But yeah, so that's kind of how Sabrina and I met. Was I did a class in which her sister showed up for. Thanks for coming, Melissa.
Yeah. Yeah. No, seriously, I was sick. I had never been as sick as I was. We were sick for about 2 weeks. I'm not going to give you details, but I had never been that sick in my entire life. We were out. Kids stayed home. Anyways, enough about me. I've got 2 little kids. Wait, let's go back there. I've got 2 little kids.
Let's talk more about her.
And enough about you. Let's talk about me. And I have 2 dogs. I had 16 chickens, but now it turned into 2 hens and 4 roosters. But we won't even go there. Who needs roosters? I don't know, but they're pretty. And so that being said, I am new to beekeeping, and I enjoy it very thoroughly. And one of my favorite parts of getting my bees, or the beekeeping in general, is just their energy. You get the bees in a little box that has screens on each side, and it's wooden, and the queen is in the box, and all the bees stick around because of the queen. And when you get that box, it's this humming energy ball, and then when you take it out to your hive, anytime you go and check with the hive, just the energy from those bees is just so powerful, it makes it all worth it. I know there's so many more benefits of honey and wax and pollination and such, but just to be in the presence of that many bees is just...
She found that absolutely enlightening.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
When I was first introduced to honeybees, and bees in general, like I said, I was a city kid, and so any insect that flew needed to die with my fly swatter, right? Mm-hmm. Everything and all. And my husband was a kid of 13 siblings, and they lived out in the country. And so their family was really dependent on having honeybees as be a source of sugar for their family. So he had this background, and he pestered me for years about getting bees. And I'd be like, no, not here. You can have some, okay, you can have a couple, you can keep them on somebody else's land, not here. And we went through this whole thing, and eventually they creeped into my yard. And the first time that he brought this package that Sabrina is talking about into our life, there were probably 20 packages of these bees.
And there are how many thousands of bees are in a package?
In a couple of, there's like 3,000 bees in a
3,000 bees. So when she says 20, think 20 packages about the size of a shoebox approximately, with screens so you can see they're right there.
And the vibration, it's like a heart. You can actually, they're all working together and they're flexing. But this to me, the first time I ever saw that, I had such a reaction, such a...
Terrified?
Terrified. I told my husband I would have rather lit myself on fire and ran out of that building. I mean, inside my heart, I was so freaked out that I ran and I left the building. So I feel really confident now that when I start with people who are new to beekeeping and afraid of bees, I know that fear.
Yeah.
And you could have never told me, 10 years ago. You couldn't have told the 10 years ago self of me, hey, guess what? You're going to have a couple hundred beehives and you're going to be managing them all by yourself. And I would have said, no. That and that is what I kept telling John. No, not happening. Once that happened, though, once they started getting into my home, like in the land that I live on, and I would be working outside, working my garden, and they were like all over everything. So I was like, oh, I can't go outside because the bees. Well, then, eventually you're forced to be outside, and I'm outside, and I'm like, oh, they're just kind of doing their own thing. And then they do this great thing with rocks and anything wet. They land on them, and they start licking them, and they bathe in the sun, and, I'm like, oh, look at that. And I became very quickly fascinated by them. And, I'd watch them pulse. I'd watch them come up at a watering feeder and start doing their little dance and a little talk to each other. And I said, I can do this better than he can. So I went to every class I could find and got every book I could read and talked to all the beekeepers I could find. And fast forward like 10 years. So now in the spring, you could capture me putting in 100 packages of bees in a couple hours now. I mean, it used to take me hours and hours, and now I can do 100 packages of bees in...
And when she says 100 packages of bees, that means, so there's a hive, which is pretty much a box of different levels, and there's, what inserts the...
Frames.
I'm still very, I'm a little wet behind the ears. But I lose the words sometimes, so that's where you'll come in nicely. But they have the frames, and that's where they build the wax and the honey on. And there's generally 10 of them in a box that's called a drone or a super.
It's a hive body.
A hive body, and then
the super's full of honey.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, the super is the honey that we get. But and then you put the box in there, and then you have to take the queen out. And then there's a little, she's in her own little box, and that's the only thing that's keeping the bees around. And then you have to delicately have her hang in with the frames, and then you leave that, and then the next day you go there, and all the bees come out of their box, and they go into the frames, and they go all around the queen, and then you take that box out. So when she says, I'm inserting that many...
I'm doing 100 packages.
100 packages. That's not just like. I mean, there's a system to it, and there's this delicacy, and there's a delicate,
There is a really beautiful way to do it, which I teach everybody to do it. A slow release. You let your queen get out, meet the new gang, which she's actually been in with for about 3 or 4 days, and let them assimilate. Because let's face it, this is Wisconsin. They have been on a semi-load of bees coming from California for 3 days.
And more than likely, they've dropped in temperature, however many degrees.
And the truck drivers do a great job of trying to keep the temperature inside the trailer, at a steady level. They're not getting overheated. They're not getting chilled. It takes a lot to get bees to come from California to Wisconsin. And when I first started keeping bees, I did it the way every other large beekeeper does this. And they know this because you can't be delicate and do it the right way. Mm-hmm. You wind up taking those poor bees and you slam them as fast and as hard as you can into a box. You slip the queen and the cage in there and pull the cap, put everything on, move to the next hive. Repeatedly. It's really brutal on the bees. They're all stressed out from having to do that long trip. They're super stressed out. Mm-hmm. Now what I do is I spritz them down with sugar water so they can start getting some nutrition in them right away and calm them down. I get them into the box, I pull a few frames out, I put the queen out, and we do something called a slow release, and we'll do a video about that a little bit later. But the nice thing about it is there's a way to keep bees in which you and the bees are kind of in sync with one another. Mm-hmm. It feels good to you, and it feels good to them. And you will develop a relationship where you start watching beekeepers being shirtless and all this kind of stuff out in the beehives. And I know a lot of people from Wisconsin think that they could do that, but and you can. You will just learn that sometimes it's the temperature of the day. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go mess with them today because of the temperature, or I am going to mess with them today because of the temperature. But I get to know my hives really pretty well, and I keep track of my hives. I have a notebook, and each hive has a number, and I know what's going on with that hive. I started keeping bees a lot differently in the last 5 years than I did the first 5 years. And I have I feel a little bit more holistic about how I'm treating my bees right now. I really know what's going on with them, and I know when they're good, and I know when they're not good, and I know who's a happy hive, and I know who's not such a happy hive. And it's kind of interesting. But Sabrina's bees, being that's her first year out, and she's just kind of like a let it be. I'm just gonna do this and see how this works out.
I fully had the intention of doing exactly what you said, of studying as much as I did at the beginning. I read everything I could. I watched a lot of videos, mainly when it required me to take action. That was being, putting the bees in the hive.
I have this feeling that every time she knew that I would be coming or calling, she watched a video.
I really had the
worst way to be.
But then when you've got, a 3-year-old saying Mom this and a 7-year-old saying Mom that, then all of a sudden my bee priority turned into, you guys have been around a lot longer than, a lot of people give you credit for. I think you're fine. I'll check on you next week, or I'll check on you next week until I get a call from Sue. How are your bees doing? Or I touch base with her and realize, it's been a month. I should probably check on them, and they're fine.
She had a great experience this year because no amount of neglect made Sabrina's bees do poorly. And right down the road from her is another beekeeper, a young kid that I worked with all summer long, and he did everything textbookly perfect. And he looked at his bees every week.
Once a week?
Oh, maybe a couple times a week.
Sure.
I mean, he was in those hives a lot, and he had everything you can imagine go wrong.
And so what she's explaining is that, when it's not that you just put the bees in and they're fine, there are different things that can happen, like the queen can die, or they get they max out their space and they need more space and they just decide to leave, and then your hive is gone, and then there's different diseases. There's all these different type of things that can happen to your hive, and that's why it's important to be, keep notes on it, like she was saying, or keep a tabs on what's going on, or what does it look like. And it worked in my benefit, where I just kind of like a crock pot, I set it and I forget it, and then I came back and checked on it a long time in between.
And so in anything that we're ever going to tell you, I'm going to always say there's never one right way. Mm-hmm. And that your environment at your home and the neighbor's home, something can be different that will make one place be prosperous and another place not be prosperous. And it won't be because you're a bad beekeeper. You've tried everything. But environmentally, there are going to be some things that are going to be out of your hands. And you're just going to have to get really smart about watching your bees and letting your bees tell you what's happening within their hive. And that's really, really important. You got to keep an eye on those little guys.
Yeah.
Little girls, really.
Yeah.
Little girls. They're all about the girls.
So, I was, opposite of Sue. Sue grew up in the city and was afraid of flying insects. I was a farm girl. I grew up on a organic grass-fed beef farm, and I learned the importance of, well, I just had never been really afraid of flying insects, but the honeybee being different of any other sort of flying bee, wasp, whatever, or even other flying insects, in that the honeybee, you may not know this, and so many people don't know this, but I think people are learning that a honeybee doesn't sting you unless it feels its hive is being threatened. It doesn't just go and, like a wasp or a hornet, go and maliciously attack you. And unlike a hornet and a wasp and some other bees, when a honeybee stings you, it dies. So unlike a hornet or a wasp, they can go and sting you, and then they can go and sting her.
I think my experience as a kid, too, is I bet you I had little to no exposure to honeybees. And I, of course, was, my experience was with wasps. And wasps are something that bite and can do it multiple times. So that was really like this childhood fear I had of, flying insects.
It's almost like a phobia. I mean, it's stick with you. And I get it and you're just perfect proof that you might be sitting there watching this video thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so with you, girlfriend. Like, if it's flying, kill it, spray it, keep it out of the house, or I'm running away from it.
No, oh gosh, a couple of the girls rode in on me today, and they're in the house, and pick them up and carry them outside.
But we're at a place now in time where we almost need to bring it back to the basics of looking at the things that we rely on, and our food source is one thing that relies on pollination, and the biggest pollinators are honeybees, and so many people could benefit from knowing some of the simple things, and one of them being is that, don't kill just anything that flies, because even if it's not a honeybee, other bees pollinate, and this is a time where it might be most obvious to just bring it back to the basics and take care of the things that are simple, like insects.
Yes.
Bees.
And I spent 25 years of my life working in healthcare and specialized in heart and lungs, and saw so many people with allergies and asthma, and that was pretty much my life for 25 years. And environmentally, it became really clear that we were products of our environment. And when I finally got done being in healthcare, and that happened not because I didn't care about helping people anymore. I couldn't stand that patients became clients, and clients got dollar values attached to them, and their lives basically was attached to a dollar bill. And I am not good about that whatsoever. And so when I finally left healthcare, I started caring for people in a whole different way. And I started caring about my own environment. Being a city kid, I've only ever ate steaks that come out of a plastic package kind of thing. When we moved up here, we started raising our own beef. I can't stand a steak anymore if it is not raised grass-fed. I can taste it right away. I've raised my own chickens now here that are I have egg layers and I have meat layers. By the way, small farm, under 10 acres, you can do that. But in this smaller environment, you can control what you eat. I can have a garden, I can have my animals. The taste is so completely different, but I also know what's going into them. And when I had the kids in 4-H for a while, there's a big push to get your animals all vaccinated up, feed them up really big with corn and,
win awards and be biggest showmanship.
Yeah, and I was never cool with that because I was like, that is not good. I mean, obviously when you feed us crap to our bodies, we get large and engorged, and we become very unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
How is that different? You're doing this to animals all the time, and you're pushing them for production, and they don't even get to maturity before they're hit to butcher weight.
Mm-hmm.
There's something a little bit wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
And especially and how is that food that you're eating, you are what you eat, how's that going to come back into your body? So for me, it was an interesting trip, because it didn't start out my life being someone who wanted to live out in the country, didn't ever want to live out in the country. Neighbors to me are people that you see through your bathroom window. Not, I got to get out on the road and flag them out because I'm out of sugar, and maybe they can help me out too. But that happens. But, you know, so getting into the bees is just kind of like part of who I am now, and I'm really passionate about it, and I love the whole business of the bees. Don't start me on the conversation unless you really want to know. I give people a warning about that.
Yeah.
Don't ask me about my bees unless you really wanted to know. If it's just general chit-chat, I'll just say, oh, they're fine. Yeah, they're fine.
So, you've met me being Sabrina, and we'll wrap it up just so that we don't keep you too long, because we've got a lot to share with you, and you might be wondering, dear Lord, when are you girls ever going to shut up? Yeah, so with that being said, this is Sue, and I'm Sabrina, and thank you for joining us, and look at some of our other videos, and you can also visit us at www.bodybewell.com. That's body, BEE well.com. Thank you, and
Thank you.
yeah.
Bee sister.
Bees. Bee sister. Woo! Okay. Oh, so
20 minutes.